Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. And inside of today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the 10 nerfs and 10 buffs I want to see with the next set of balance changes. So it's been around 5 weeks since the last set, so I'm pretty sure that there's probably going to be some next week, maybe the week after, before the update's not going to be for another month, so there's got to be some balance changes soon, right? So let's jump into it straight away. We're going to be going through the nerfs, and the first one is absolutely Juju. So I believe Juju's the only brawler that should really receive like the biggest nerf, because she's just a cut above the rest right now, so I think she deserves a couple of nerfs. First one is with her super Gree. The health is just way too much, probably nerf it around 1,000 to be honest. It's so tanky for such a little pet, so nerf that first and foremost. And then I think they should reduce the amount of time she has to do certain abilities with her elementalist gadgets. So I think around 3 to 4 seconds is how long you can go invisible for, or you can go fast for. Just nerf it down to like 2.5 seconds, 2 seconds, because the gadget's just too good. Next with the nerfs, we need Stu. So Stu is just becoming a bit of a problem now. He received the HP buff a couple of updates ago, but of course his hype charge on top of that, and he's clearly S tier, one of the best, so he needs to be toned down a little bit. My suggestion would actually to be nerfing his hyper charge rate. I know that makes him a little bit less fun, but I think he gets hyper charge way more frequently than he should have. You know, you got to think his hyper charge is just so broken. Right now it takes 25 hits, so just nerfing it to around 30 hits means he won't be able to get like 2-3 hyper charges a game. Next up, I'm hoping we get a nerf with Ash. So I know Ash has literally only become usable right now, but he's like borderline top 10, and his hyper charge rate just charges way too quickly. So right now it takes 2 supers. I think just nerfing it to like 2.4 supers, 2.6, so it doesn't mean that he's consistently cycling his hyper charge, because it actually is very, very powerful, and you cycle like 3 or 4 a game easily, so it needs toning down a lot. So next we have Angelo. So Angelo's been S tier, A tier ever since his release, and I've just been saying for the longest time he's in need of a nerf. He's just way too strong, so I think they should either nerf the movement speed. I've been saying that for the longest time, but they're not clearly going to do that, so I'd rather them just nerf the HP of Angelo from 6,000 to around 5,400. But let's face it, they just deal so much damage, and it's just impossible to take them down with the jump gadget, etc. So nerfing the HP should be good. Next up on the nerf list, hopefully it's Lu. So again, I know Lu has only just became an S tier brawler again, but it is a bit too toxic, so I think they overdid his reload speed buff just a little bit. They actually buffed it by around 15%, which was actually too much, so they should actually revert this a little bit to try and find the sweet spot, so where Lu is like B/A tier, because if we make Lu too good of a brawler, his super is very toxic, right, and his hyper charge is one of the best in the game, so you don't want to make it too strong, so just nerf it. So right now the value is at 1,300. It used to be 1,100, so beat it in the middle, 1,200. Next up, hopefully on the nerf list, we have Amber. So I think Amber's been cemented at A tier for an entire year, and she's yet to get a hyper charge, so when she gets a hyper charge, she's quite clearly gonna break the game. So I think they should probably preemptively nerf her for this moment, because again, she's been way too strong in the meta, too versatile. So I think just nerfing the main attack damage just a little bit. This is what they tend to do when they nerf Amber, so just nerf it down to like 410 damage per flame, and I think that should be good enough, because she's going to get a hyper charge soon. That's going to be too strong. So next up, hopefully on the nerf list, we have Janet. So I know she's only just became meta, and there's a few brawlers on the list that just became meta, but it's a very balanced one. We need to nerf something, and I would definitely nerf Janet's hyper charge rate. It's just too quick. You can charge it with 2 supers, which is just too much. She spends so long in the air, and the craziest thing as well is once she's actually done with a hyper charge super, normally you get like 3 or 4 hits with that hyper charge super. You then basically got another one straight away, so it's just really hard to defeat Janet right now. So I would nerf it just to around 2.4 supers, 2.6 supers to get that hyper charge super, which again, she'll still be a really strong brawler, just not as annoying to face off against. Next up, hopefully on the nerf list, we have Larry. So the twins have been broken ever since their release, and they've probably received the most nerfs without ever falling off. So I think they should probably look at nerfing his reload star power, because that's a big reason why he's actually so strong, because it's the fact that as a thrower, it's so hard to take them down, because they can also counter tanks with the reload star power. So nerfing it from getting 30% of your ammo to 20% should be nice, because you should be able to counter throw pretty easily with any tanks, right? I mean, well, not easily, like he can still defend himself a little bit, but at least some counterplay. Tanks literally have no counterplay against it, because he just has infinite ammo. Next up, hopefully on the nerf list, we have Penny. So Penny's just too versatile right now. She's not S tier, but again, she's just too good in too many modes. So because she received the HP buff to her turret, and she got a hypercharge on top of that, I feel like they need to nerf it in some way. So either nerfing the HP turret, that probably wouldn't make sense just to rework that. So I think this should actually just nerf her supercharge rate or the hypercharge rate, one of those two things. So taking 6 hits to get her super instead, because again, I feel like when she gets a super, she's just infinitely cycling and she's just always got one available once she gets that first one. And lastly, hopefully on the nerf list, we have Rico. So Rico is still a big problem in Brawl Stars. I mean, he's only really excelling in a few maps, but where he excels in, he's just way too strong. So right now, it only takes 2.5 supers to get his hypercharge, which is crazy. You can cycle through like 3-4 a game, especially against tanks. I think they should nerf this to like 3 supers, maybe even like 3.3 supers, because the hypercharge is just so annoying. Or they could reduce the effectiveness of the hypercharge. That would make it more boring though. So let's just nerf the amount of supers it takes to get. So now moving on to the buffs I want to see with the next set of balance changes, starting off with Ems. So if you watch my streams, you know how much I love Ems because she's the best brawler in the game. No, she's just been really mid for like a year now. C tier, D tier. She's never been used in competitive, literally maybe a handful of times in the last year. So let's buff her. So the best way to actually buff her is to buff her hypercharge rate, because then it doesn't make it too toxic for the lower players because they think Ems is good, but she's actually not. So right now it takes 3.3 supers to get a hypercharge, which is way too many supers to get one. You basically never get one. They should buff this to like 2.6 supers, maybe even 2.4 supers, and then see where she goes from there. Next up on the buff wish list, we have Pam. So Pam's another brawler without a hypercharge, and maybe the hypercharge might make her good, but for now, I think they definitely need to buff her main attack damage. There's so many brawlers that have received main attack damage buffs, HP buffs, which just make it really impossible to win a 1 versus 1 with Pam, even with her healing. So just buff the damage. I would actually like to see a radius buff to her super as well, but that's probably what her hypercharge is going to be. Next up on the buff wish list, we have Sprout. So I'm starting to see again a trend where Sprout is just falling off in the meta again and again. I think a big reason maybe is because he hasn't got fast movement speed. There's a few throwers for whatever reason have a faster movement speed. You know, like Dynamite, why does he even need it? Larry, why does he need it? So why can't Sprout get it? Because he's so easy to counter with so many different assassins in the game right now. Why not just give him that extra bit of movement, which might allow him to escape a little bit easier? So next up we have Fang. So again, the big problem with Fang is that his hypercharge takes forever to charge up, but they probably don't want to go down that route because that's the reason why he was broken in the past. They need to do maybe one of a few things. Maybe they just buff the HP so then he survives when he goes into super, or should actually like decrease the delay, or to make his shoe attack a little bit more easier to hit. I know that's the whole kind of gimmick around him, that his shoe's hard to hit, so then it's harder to get his super, but maybe it should just buff it a tiny bit. I don't know. They need to do something to Fang because he's been terrible for a long time. So next up on the buff wish list, we have Charlie. So I feel like I've been making these buff wish lists for her for like 6 months. They've been trying to buff her to make her a bit better, but it's just not working. I think the obvious thing is reworking her hypercharge because it's just plain and simple terrible. But I would actually like to see a buff with one of her star powers, Digestive. I know in the past that it was pretty broken, but they should just buff it to like maybe like 35%, 40%, just a small buff, because I feel like her star powers are actually really terrible. You just don't really see what they do in a game. Next up, hopefully in the buff wish list, we have Grom. So one way to maybe balance him, I know people don't like it, but just give him a hypercharge, then he might be better, because you don't want to make him too toxic with his main attack. But if you weren't to give him a hypercharge or his hypercharge sucked, maybe they could just increase the reload speed slightly. I know I'm kind of reaching here because I've been suggesting like star power reworks and all of this stuff in the past, and it's not happening. So that makes me think they don't want to do that. They want to do something else. I don't know. Just Grom's just weird. So next up on the buff wish list, we have Jackie. So I'm starting to see her every single meta drop off as hypercharge is just getting power crept, and just there's so many brawlers that can just outrange her and keep distance. So I think for Jackie, I'd like to see a small buff to the hardy hard at star power to 30%, because Counter Crusher is just by far the better star power right now. You never want to use the other one. This might allow her to be a bit better on maps where she wasn't good on in the past, because then she could survive more hits and get closer. I don't know. I'm just kind of reaching here. I'd just like to see a small buff to her. Next up on the buff wish list, we have Sam. So another brawler where a hypercharge could make him very strong, because he basically always has his super to hand. So it could be really powerful. But if they weren't to do that, I'd actually suggest maybe just buffing his super damage, because typically with super right, you want to just super the wall. So you gain health through his star power and movement speed. But maybe increasing his super damage allows him to be a bit more aggressive and snipe people across the map with it. something like that might be nice. And lastly on the buff wish list, we have Meeple. So I know Meeple was probably in like a balanced state or secretly strong. I don't know. A lot of people find him very, very underwhelming though. So I would like to see a reload speed buff to Meeple, because that's probably one of the reasons why they're just so boring. So right now it takes 2 seconds to reload. Why not 1.8 seconds, 1.7 seconds? Might make them feel a lot more fun and just a lot better overall. But that's going to be it for today's video, guys. So let me know down in the comment section below whether I missed anything. Of course, there's a few brawlers that I could just keep repeating time and time again, like Doug, Hank, Bull, etc. But I just don't want to go over and over them. You know, Mr. P's receiving a hypercharge, so there's no point talking about it. Anyways, make sure to comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.